What's up, guys? We're back here with our second episode of Classic Addictions. We know it's been a while, but we've been kind of going through our archives and seeing what kind of movie would be a perfect one. So for this episode, we're doing Emperor's New Groove. It was made when I was very young. So obviously, we didn't see it in theaters.
I don't remember, to be honest. But it has been almost 20 years ago now.
Yeah. So this movie is kind of different from a lot of the other movies that were around at that time. You know, you have a period piece in some ways going back to South America.
I think this might be in the first one.
Yeah.
That does that.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that.
Don't quote me on that one. And then you have fourth wall breaks, which weren't very common at the time in 2000. Then you have an animated character. You don't have a romantic interest in this one.
No, that works out really well.
Yeah, it does work out well, and it's something
breaks
that
the formula.
Yeah, it does break the formula. And then, you know, you have a conniving evil person who is not a twist villain. They're evil you can pretty much see they're evil from the beginning.
Yeah.
And you have a lovable sidekick, a lovable evil sidekick, which is kind of also innovative and different.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, like it's one of those things where like the story is not necessarily, you know, revolutionary, because, you know, you have seen these where it's like, oh, this guy's a dick, you know, he gets redeemed to where he's actually a good guy, you know, but it does it in a way that I think is unique, or at least very enjoyable for the style they went with. And, you know, the backdrop is something that, you know, will stick with you just because of, like you said, how unique it is. Yeah. And I don't think we've seen one since this series, you know, or if you want to call it a series. But Michael?
Yeah, so before we get into our favorite scenes, because there's so many good lines, similar to like the SpongeBob episode, there's so many good lines, so many just great scenes. One of the things I really appreciate, besides, you know, what we've already talked about, is kind of the tone throughout the movie. There's one point, which, you know, I can spoil this, I guess. There's one point where they're like, well, how did you guys get here before us? And then they're like, how did we? You know, it's like, it didn't take itself so serious. It's like, you know, we have to get everything right, and, you know, this isn't fantasy. It's like, yeah, people are like morphing into animals.
Yeah. Well, and also you could take it too as like, you know, a lot of people, especially like when you get older, are like, oh, this never made any sense, you know? Like, obviously, like you said, you have to kind of take into consideration some things, you know, like you said, people are turning into animals, so it's not the realistic movie. But, you know, still though, you know, when you go back and critique certain things, you know, even I think in like kids shows especially, there's sometimes a lot of like cutting corners in like the writing room where they'll just write something, and even though it doesn't make sense or they don't go in and explain it, they just like, it's kids, like they won't notice or they don't care. So it's really nice to see that, like, you know, they kind of like save themselves from a plot hole, and they didn't need to do that, but it just makes it kind of hold up to like an older audience watching it. Another thing I really like about it is, you know, like the actors that they got. It has a phenomenal cast, and something that hasn't really, you know, it's not new. They've gotten a lot of people that, you know, have done more adult things and get them to do voices. But in this, I think it works really well. The comedy is something that, you know, like David Spade, he's like one of those people that is able to do kind of like immature humor, or maybe not immature is the right word, but, you know, just like stuff that's, you know, accepted by like all ranges of audience and age. But he also has that more like adult thing to where like he can sneak in lines and stuff like that, and, you know, has it there for some of the older people watching as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's many things that are great about this movie. There's also, at the beginning of the movie, there's a song, and there's several
Tom Jones,
great music parts throughout. But that song, even if you look, like, I think when I heard it as a child, I didn't like pay attention to the words, but the words are just great too. Mm-hmm. It's like it's jamming, and the words are hilarious and fitting. So. It almost gives you the feel of like a buddy cop movie in a sense, because you have like two people, you know, they're working together and they have problems in their partnership, but then it's, you know, getting together and working out those problems throughout the whole movie. So let's get into some of our favorite scenes. There's so many to talk about and so many great lines.
I mean, you know, every scene with Kronk is just great. That's a character. I mean, you know, Patrick Warburton, if I'm saying that right. He's one of a kind, and that character just fits him so well. And like all of those scenes are just priceless. Like even the stuff that like when we were like watching again, I think there's some weens that weens? Did I say weens? I meant scenes. That like maybe it's not the go-to like say that you would quote, but they're still like so funny, and they're so, like when they're like locked in the closet, and she's like, "All right, Kunk, just knock the door down." He's like, "Knock it down." This is made out of hand-carved mahogany. I can't break this down. So even stuff like that, like even if it's like really small that you wouldn't even notice that, or like maybe kids wouldn't even I love that.
It is kind of if you watch Guardians of the Galaxy, which everyone has, it is kind of like that one character in Guardians where like he says certain things like I think he's playing like double dutch with the kids, and he's like, I think Yzma's like, it's time to go, and he's like, okay, switch, and then like she has to play again. There's lines like that are great. I think one that stands out to me is the lab scene. So when you first get to see Yzma's lab, there's obviously the famous pull the lever line. That's great because you're not expecting it at the time. And then just the like the animations of like what she was thinking to do with Cusco before she just wanted to give him poison to kill him, and then them deciding to have like a dinner. Just that entire sequence is great, and I especially love Yzma trying to tell Kronk to knock out Cusco. It's great as well.
the freaking cabbage broccoli roll,
and just the drink scene too, and like
him trying to dispose of the bottle. Just against the wall. There's and there's even like a lot of great scenes between John Goodman and David Spade with their characters while they're on their little trip, like in the, I guess, wilderness or whatever you want to call it.
Jungle.
Yeah, jungle. There's a lot of back and forth, especially like like when they're going over, like they're about to go over like the waterfall. And even like when they're having their little bits of moments of like, I guess, kind of like where like Cusco has to depend on him, but then he kind of snaps back into his like emperor self and like says like, "Oh, I don't need you." Like there's even like good serious moments between them. And
that's my favorite use of cross-dressing in movies. it's pretty great.
I don't know about that. Well, it's up there.
It's up there. It's up there. It's up there with that Robin Williams movie. But anyway.
Yeah. There's a lot of things too that like I love animation a lot. I've never really grown out of it, and it's something that I always love looking back on older ones as well. Two of the things that I really love about animation, or that I look for, is like the comedy is a big thing, but like I like the comedy through the music. And like you said, there's a lot of that is just played like really well, because like for kids, like they try to make it upbeat, and so like you're like, as a kid you more enjoy it as like a rhythm, you're like, oh, it sounds catchy, but you maybe, like you said, not pay attention to the words, but like really looking back, it like even magnifies that, because like a lot of the dialogue in like the songs are written really well, and saying that they can be that catchy but also like that funny on the play of like the time and like the atmosphere of the place is really saying something. And one other thing that I really like in animation that you probably don't see as much of in this, but they still do it really comically well, is the combat like action sequences. Like there's like one where it's like, oh, you think you're gonna get like a really clash of like all the soldiers, but then they turn into animals, and so the way they play off of that is like really great, and that's something that you can really only do in animation. Like that's something that really only works there, and I think they do it hysterically funny. Yeah,
I mean, the villain for this one, Yzma, is fairly unique, and I like pretty much every scene she's in. Her interactions with Kronk are hilarious. There's a pretty great scene in a diner where the cook, even what cracks me up more than anything, there's a lot of great lines there, but the one where the cook is quitting, he just like he has like a bowl of chili, he just like pours it in a briefcase, and he pours everything like 10 feet high in the air and then closes it, and he's like, I'm out of here. That's pretty funny. There's just a lot of scenes that you can go back and reference and laugh about. It really, some movies you really don't know how they age, but having watched it recently, it did age pretty well. Mm-hmm. And I think none of the parts really seemed archaic or out of place, or just there for for children or anything like that. I think it was pieced together fairly well. And I liked pretty much any character. I mean, even the kids, like the kids could get annoying, but the one scene where they have where the boy wakes up and he talks about like what happened in the previous scene, and then like the kid, the guy and the girl who were I guess like 6 and 8 or something, and they have like an argument about that. Mm-hmm. It's just enough that it's not like too much to be annoying, and I don't know. I just really liked every character, even the wife is great.
Mm-hmm. There's like you were saying too with like the villains. These are not to say that there isn't other movies that have like lovable villains, but this is one that I think is done especially well because there's a lot of scenes in like regular movies and also in animation where you get scenes that it only has the villains in or like the main antagonist, and you're kind of like it's fine, but like you've seen it every time, like especially in like Disney movies, like maybe they have like a song, but then that's like the only thing that stands out really in like the villains. But these, like Michael said, they have like a very good charisma, not only between like both of them on the evil side, but like the way that they just fit into the plot and like how their characters act and like what their motivation is. It just works really well in terms of making it enjoyable, and sometimes even more so than the heroes that you follow in this.
Yeah, I think overall I just really like the movie. There's a lot of different lines. If you haven't seen it or its sequel, both of them are really great.
That's another thing that's hard to do with especially Disney movies. Sequel wise, sometimes the sequel ruins the first movie just because of how much stuff it undoes, and the sequel for this is like a refreshing take on like a sequel for a franchise, focusing on more of a side character and not basically, they do revisit other ones, but you get to see that progression. It's not going back and then like tearing everything down that the first one did. So that lets the first one stand even more so.
And as much of a jerk as Cusco is in the beginning, I think his development as a character really props up the movie. And I think the message, which is sometimes it's important in Disney movies that anyone, everyone has some good at them, and you just really have to sometimes work hard to get that to come out. Mm-hmm. Regardless of if you believe that message or not, at least it's a good one to have for kids, and it's just a great movie. So, is it a certified classic addiction? That's the question we have today.
That's true.
What kind of where are you coming from with that?
Well, I would say it's this stupid phone. I would say it's definitely a certified classic addiction, at least for me. It's one that I think I got even more enjoyment over than when I saw it all those years ago. And maybe it's just because I forgot a lot of the things, but there's a lot of little moments that I think really make this one shine. And like you said, because like all of the characters really are on equal ground with each other in terms of like how they're received and like the impact you have on them, I think that makes it, enjoyable all the way through. And it's almost like, I think like the movie is like only like an hour and like 20 minutes, and it goes by really fast just because of how much of a good time you have. So that's why for me it would be a certified classic.
Yeah, so I actually watched this movie like 3 times in the last 2 weeks because my younger kids in my family were over at the house, and we just put that on, so I didn't have to watch.
Have they ever seen it before?
No, they hadn't, and I didn't want to watch Barbie Princess. So,
well, hell yeah, you're going to choose this one over that.
Honestly, it's a really great movie. It doesn't, watching it once, 2, 3 times, I never got tired of it. There's just great scenes. There's really no scene that I don't like. It's just a great movie, and it's a certified classic addiction. I think if you haven't seen it, it's a movie that you should go back and watch. I think the subject matter being out there and it be kind of like out of the mainstream, there's not that, when you think about Disney movies, this isn't usually the first one you think of. So I think a lot of people may not have seen it. You should go and check it out. It's a great movie. Comment back on us and thank us when you're done.
The one question I have, since your, what did you say, nephews and nieces, since they hadn't seen it before, what was their initial reaction?
Both of them really liked it. I think my nephew, who is I think in first or second grade. He really liked it because I think that's probably the perfect age where you can sound all the jokes. And the other child who was like 5, they didn't understand everything, but hey, they weren't bored by it. So that's pretty much a thumbs up
That's
at
cool.
that age. So.
That's cool. Yeah. Now the real question is, do they have a Spanish dub?
I don't know, but I want to. Do they have a mind dub? Do they have it in the original language?
That would be hilarious. I want to check it out.
I don't even know like if llamas look like that in real life, but I want one. Can I get a plushie?
You might be able to. I think it looks pretty similar. Although in some scenes it looks like he's wearing like a jacket, and I don't think that's how their hair works, but
cool animation. Toy Story.
The real question is, he didn't spit a whole lot in the movie.
That's true. He did spit out some grass when he ate it.
It's true. Because grass is nasty.
That's true. Don't eat grass, kids. Yeah. But anyway, that's pretty much it for this one.
Grass tastes bad.
It does taste bad. Gotta clarify that. So yeah, this is a certified classic addiction. If you haven't watched it, check it out. Watch the second one if you haven't watched that either, or go back and watch 2 of them back to back. I did that, and it's great as well. And it's really not. It's not Lord of the Rings 9 hours of your time. It's quick and painless. So.
I think you could watch both of these back to back, getting halfway through like The Hobbit.
Pretty much. All right, guys, that's it. And this has been our second episode of Classic Addictions. We'll be back with more. Our episode by episode content. Our comic stuff. Our book stuff coming up here pretty soon / already out, depending on when this is up. True. And we'll see you guys next day or week or year with another one.
Hopefully within the year.
Later, Addicts.
All right, peace.